we're going to write one now that is going to be able to modify a document. Now, this is a little bit tricky because we're saying, hey, whenever the user writes a document, I want to change it. What do you think that's going to trigger?
Another change.
Another change. What do you think that's going to trigger? Yeah. So the reason we're going to have this talk now is you do need some, it's kind of like recursion, right? You need something in place to eventually stop you, right? Otherwise, you will keep going and going and going. So that's kind of why we're doing this quick example to kind of put that in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen for a document write. Now, document writes are very much like they are for the security rules. You have a write, which is a create, an update, or a delete. But you can also do on update, on create, on delete, just like you can do as the security rules. So let's try this one out. We'll say exports dot sanitized content. And that will be functions. In this case, we're going to try to hook into Firestore. We'll get a given document path that we're looking for. That's going to be very much like the security rules. Post with a post ID. And that'll be a param you can hook into if you need to. And we'll say on write. Whenever somebody like modifies or changes one or whatever, we'll go ahead and we'll call this and we'll say async. And you'll get the change and a context there. We'll go ahead, and so the change, so if you're creating one, you'll get the snapshot. If you're changing one, you're going to get the before and the after, right? So we did like a kind of a very like loose validation with the security rules. We were like, make sure it has a title, right? But here we can get even more granular if we wanted to, which is, okay, they sent one with an empty title, use the old title, right? So you'll have all the things before, all the things afterwards. Right, or what's currently in the database and what's coming in. Not unlike the security rules. So we're going to do on write, and we'll have this change. And one thing we want to check for is the change. We saw this exists before. What's a situation where the after effect would be the document no longer existing?
Deletion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So write works for create, update, and delete. We don't want to write a function for both create and update. Right. So it's better to write one for write and check to see like, okay, if it's because we deleted, like, all right, we're not doing anything here. We're done. Cool. And so from here we could say content will be, and the change is like a snapshot. Change.after.data. That's all the properties. And what we could do is if there is content, we will return. The way that these all work, you have to return something, right? Otherwise, it never knows when it's over, right? The Cloud Function doesn't know when to spin down. So if you have a callback and like you never actually return anything, like it might just but basically what it does is it just doesn't run your function. It's going to check to see if you return something at some point or another. Because if you return either a value, it's like, okay, I know I'm done. Or if you return a promise, when that promise resolves, it knows that it's done. So you need to return. If you don't return, it's not going to work. If it's just like, oh, we reached the end of the function, that's the end, like it doesn't know that there wasn't a callback on the event loop. And it just won't run your function. So we always need to make sure that no matter what, we return something in every case. So in this case, we return change.after. We'll get the reference, like to where it was in the database, and we'll update it. And we'll do a content. Now the content is replace. We'll just do, I think I joked before we're going to do CoffeeScript, so let's do that. All instances of CoffeeScript with some stars. I don't know if that's enough stars, but it's fine. All right, I'm not deploying this because this has the problem that we talked about earlier, which is this will trigger a change, which will trigger the function, which will trigger a change, which will trigger the function, so on and so forth. Also, there is a case where there's no content and it doesn't return anything. So we'll return null if there was no content. We will also write a new property. We'll call it sanitize. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just something that you have on the document that you can hold on to. And we'll grab that as well. And we'll say if content, and it's not sanitized already. So it has content, but sanitize either doesn't exist or it's false. Go ahead and do this. That will trigger another run on it, but then that's it. Right? At that point, it'll no longer run, we'll return null, and everything will be good in the world. Right? All right. Let's go ahead and let's deploy this one. Cool, it's going up. Now, even though I have to deploy them to work with them, I can still work with them against localhost, right? So I don't necessarily need to go to production, right? It is actually going to affect production. So one thing you might want to do is have a project for staging and a project for production, switch out the files, so on and so forth. But we can still try it against localhost. And I mean, it doesn't really matter, but. Log in the meantime. Cool. Let's see if that's gone up yet. We give it a second. Now, again, the functions do take some time to warm up, which means we might see the word CoffeeScript in the post, and then once the function warms up and runs, then it will go ahead and replace it. So to think that these are all like instantaneous, like HTTP request comes in like Rails, it hits my controller does stuff before we commit it to the database, that's not how this works. It's going in, the idea of it going into the database will trigger the function that will change it, right? And so like you might, especially the very first time, you might very well see the word show up. You'll probably see it disappear slightly after that. They're not instantaneous. Like I said, the feedback loop is not great. All right. So there it is. It is unclear. Yep, and there it went. Right, the function went ahead. Woo!
I do recall you complaining about curly braces earlier. So
yeah, I have mixed feelings about CoffeeScript. I was a Rubyist before I was a JavaScript developer, and like the way that I learned how to like do stuff in JavaScript was I wrote like Ruby-like syntax and then translated it from CoffeeScript to JavaScript to figure out how you actually write JavaScript. That explains a lot, right? So I have fond memories of CoffeeScript. Cool. One thing that we didn't do before that I meant to do is these are all in crazy order because they're by the ID. We should order it by created at one point. But so we can see that we can edit the database and modify stuff.